Hey guys, welcome back to Magic Minds, and it's Jack, and today we're going to be doing a deck tech on Grimgrin Corpseborn. Alright, so I've been wanting to make this deck for a while, and so here we are. Let's get right into it. Alright, so Grimgrin Corpseborn is 3 blue and a black, so 5 mana total for a 5/5 legendary creature zombie warrior. And Grimgrin Corpseborn enters the battlefield tapped and doesn't untap during your untap step. But you can sacrifice a creature, untap Grimgrin, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. So, pretty good so far, but then when Grimgrin attacks, destroy target creature defending player controls, then put a +1/+1 counter on Grimgrin. So, this commander is a really fun commander to play, really fun to build around, and I'm excited to see how this deck really works out. So, first I'm going to be looking at some of the good ramp cards in the deck. Alright, so some of the best ramp cards in the deck are Dimir Signet, which is 2 colorless mana for an artifact, and you can tap 1 to add black and blue, so that's pretty good. And also Commander Sphere, 3 colorless mana for an artifact, tap 1, add 1 mana of any color to your commander's color identity. So you add 1 mana to your mana pool, basically. And then you can sacrifice Commander Sphere to draw a card. So, pretty good. And then Basalt Monolith, which is 3 colorless mana for an artifact. Tap it, add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. Does not untap as normal during untap phase. So, basically, it does not untap unless you pay 3 colorless mana. So, it's pretty good. It's okay. And then Soul Ring, obviously, 1 mana adds 2. And Solemn Simulacrum is 4 colorless mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem. And when it enters the battlefield, you can search your life for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. And then when Solemn Simulacrum dies, you may draw a card. So all these are pretty good ramp cards for the deck. And so yeah, now we're going to move on to some great removal cards. Alright, so some of the best removal cards is Rapid Hybridization, which is 1 blue instant, destroy target creature. It can't be regenerated. That creature controller creates a 3/3 green frog lizard creature token onto the battlefield. So just destroy a creature for 1 mana and they get a token. And then this technically isn't removal, but it's a counter spell, so I put it in the same category. So it's Undermine, which is blue, blue, and a black, so 3 mana for an instant. Counter target spell, its controller loses 3 life. So, pretty good for a counterspell. And then Cast Down, which is 1 in a black, instant, destroy target non-legendary creature. So, all these pretty good for the deck. And yeah, so now we're going to move on to some of the great protection cards, because Grimgrin really needs to be protected in this deck. So, moving on to the protection category, one of the best protection cards, in my opinion, is Darksteel Plate. So that's 3 colorless mana for an artifact equipment, and is indestructible, and equipped creature has indestructible. And so yeah, so Darksteel Plate has indestructible, and the creature that it's equipped to has indestructible too, and it's equipped to. And then Classic 1, Propaganda, 2 in a blue, enchantment, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 colorless mana for each creature they control that's attacking you. So just pretty good. Forcing your opponents to pay mana whenever they want to attack. And then Swiftfoot Boots, which is 2 colorless mana for an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. That haste is really important because when we play Grimgrin out, we can untap him and then instantly attack with him. Alright, so now we're going to move on to some recursion. And there's only 2 cards in this category, so yeah. So Return from Extinction, which is 1 in a black for a sorcery. choose one, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand. So pretty good. That's just for if something gets into your graveyard. Let's say Grimgrin gets into your graveyard and you have this card, you can just skip commander attacks by getting them out of your graveyard. And then command the Dread Horde, which is 4 black for a sorcery. Choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards. Command the Dread Horde deals damage to you equal to the total converted cost of those cards. Put them onto the battlefield under your control. So basically, you're just choosing as many cards as you want out of anybody's graveyard, but there's a cost that it deals damage to you from all of their mana costs combined. So yeah, it's pretty good, and is great in some circumstances. So yeah, Command Dread Horde and Turn from Extinction, 2 good recursion cards. Alright, so now we're going to be moving on to some sacrifice fodder. And so these are cards that when you sacrifice them, they don't care about being sacked. They do something, or they just don't really care about being sacked. They're just there to be sacked by Grimgrin or other guys. So, alright, let's get right into it. So, first one is Reform, which is 3 and a blue for an 0-1, and it's a creature worm, and when it dies, you create a 3-3, and then when that dies, create a 6-6, and when that dies, it creates a 9-9. So yeah, pretty good for that. And then next one is Reassembling Skeleton, which is 1 and a black for a 1-1 creature skeleton warrior. And you can pay 1 and a black, returns Reassembling Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's just there for sacrificing with all that kind of stuff, and you can return it, which is nice. And then the next one is Thopter Assembly, which is not exactly, like, the card isn't exactly sacrifice fodder, but it creates stuff, creates a ton of token, which is great. So Thopter Assembly, 6 colorless mana for a 5/5 artifact creature Thopter. Has flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no Thopters other than Thopter Assembly, return Thopter Assembly to its owner's hand and create 5 1/1 Thopter artifact creature tokens with flying. But this is absolutely insane because then we can just sacrifice all 5 of them to Grimgrin immediately. And then we can play Thopter Assembly again the next turn and get 5 more. It's like a really cool loop that is great and allows Grimgrin to get really big really fast. So now we're going to go on to Discordant Piper, which is 1 and a black for 2/1. When it dies, it creates an 0-1 goat. And then Dire Fleet Hoarder, 1 and a black, 2/1. When it dies, it creates a colorless treasure token. And then Pitiless Plunderer, 3 and a black for a 1/4. And when it dies, whenever a creature you control dies, create a treasure. And then Lawless Broker, 2 and a black for a 3/2. When Lawless Broker dies, put a +1 counter on target creature control. So that just adds another +1 counter to Grimgrin if we want. And then Youthful Scholar, which is 3 and a blue for a 2/2. And when this dies, it draws 2 cards. So this one is really good because drawing 2 cards is pretty good in this deck. And with Grimgrin, just adds +1 counter. It's just a great little thing. Doom Dissenter, 1 and a black for a 1/1, and when it dies, create a 2/2. And then Crow of Dark Tidings, 2 and a black for a 2/1 as flying. When it enters the battlefield or dies, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. So all of these are great for the deck. So now we're going to look at some board wipes. So we have 2 board wipes here. So the first one is Crux of Fate, which is 3 black for a sorcery. You can choose one, either destroy all non-dragon creatures or destroy all dragon creatures. So yeah, it's a pretty good board wipe. You can destroy all non-dragon creatures, which is probably most creatures, because how often do you play against like a really like dragon heavy deck? I mean, there's lots out there, but they're not usually played. And then the next one is Devastation Tide. That's 3 blue for sorcery. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands. So that includes you. And then it has Miracle, which is Miracle 1 in a blue, which is if you draw Devastation Tide, you can pay 1 in a blue instead of playing 5 mana and play it instantly and do that ability. So it's pretty good. But not the best board wipes. But so yeah, that's it for the board wipes. So now we're gonna look at some of the stuff that can make Grimgrin unblockable when he's like a 10-10, 15, 20. I'm not exaggerating. This deck can really get him to 20 power. So yeah. So there's 2 cards in this category. There's also one that I mentioned earlier, Whisper Soak Cloak. That one is also a one that can make Grimgrin unblockable. I forgot to mention that. So yeah. But for now, Key to the City in Aqueous form. So Aqueous form is 1 in a blue for an enchantment aura. And enchant creature can't be blocked. Whenever enchanted creature attacks, scry 1. So great all-around card, just 1 mana, just put it on Grimgrin before combat and then swing in and get a ton of damage, hopefully. And then Key to the City, which is personally one of my favorite cards, is 2 colorless mana for a artifact, and you can tap it, discard a card. Up to 1 target creature can't be blocked this turn. And then it has whenever Key to the City becomes untapped, you may pay 2 colorless mana. If you do, draw a card. So this is great because all it costs is just discarding a card, and Grimgrin is unblockable, and you can do that each turn. It's not a one-time thing. So yeah, those 2 cards great for being unblockable for Grimgrin, and yeah. So now we're going to look at some Aristocrat cards. So there's a lot of them, and these are really important in the deck because they kind of reward you for sacrificing stuff. So yeah. So the first one is Grim Horror Specs, which is 2 in a black for a 3/2. And whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. Pretty good, and also has Morph. And then Bastion of Remembrance, which is 2 in a black for an enchantment. When Bastion of Remembrance enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token, which is also really good because then it just gives Grimgrin another thing to sack. And then whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And then Smothering Abomination, which is 2 black for a 4/3 creature Eldrazi, and it has Devoid, so it has no color, and it has Flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. So, not great that when at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature, but hopefully you're going to be generating enough creatures that doesn't really matter for Grimgrin. And then, but when you do that, you do draw a card, which is another bonus. So the next one is Pawn of Ulamog, which is 1 black for a 2/2 creature vampire shaman. And when Pawn of Ulamog or another non-token creature you control dies, you may put a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature token onto the battlefield that you can sack it to add 1 to your mana pool. So that's just a good card, obviously. With all these cards, it's just going to be so great with Grimgrin, getting all these abilities and stuff like that. And then Zulaport Cutthroat, which is just the classic Aristocrat. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Ruthless Deathfang, which is actually 4 blue and a black for a 4/4 creature dragon, and as flying, and whenever you sacrifice a creature, target opponent sacrifices a creature. So this is really good, and I don't often get it out with this deck, but with Ruthless Deathfang out and with Grimgrin out and a ton of creatures, especially with Thopter Assembly, this is just going to be such a good engine going with your opponent sacking creatures and you gaining +1 counters and all that kind of stuff. It's so good. And then Nightmare Shepherd, which is 2 black for a 4/4 enchantment creature demon. and has flying, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a 1/1 and it's nightmare and it's a nightmare in addition to its other types. So basically, instead of a creature dying, when it dies, it gets exiled, and then it becomes a copy of what it was as a 1/1, but it still has all those abilities, which is really good because I think it still counts as Grimgrin getting a counter when it's sacked, but then it comes back. And then the next one is Harvester of Souls, which is 4 black for a 5/5, and it has Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw cards. That's anything. So whenever a non-token creature from anybody dies, you may draw a card. And then, last but not least, Butcher of Malik here. Obviously, it's 5 black, and for a 5/4, and it's flying, and when Butcher of Malik here or another creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. So all these, very good for the deck, and definitely should be running them. So yeah. So the next category is going to be card draw. And so some of the best card draw cards are Drawn from Dreams, which is 2 blue. So 4 mana for a sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. And then Mystic Remora, which is 1 blue mana for an enchantment. Cumulative Upkeep, which is, so on the first upkeep that you have it, you pay 1 mana. The second one, you pay 2, 3, 4, and so on. But what it does is whenever a target opponent successfully casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card. That player must pay 4 to counter this effect. So basically like a worsened version of Ristic Study. It's still pretty good though, so that's why it's in this deck. Also Serum Visions, which is 1 blue for a sorcery. Draw a card, and then Scry 2, pretty good. And then Epiphany at the Drown Yard, which is X blue for a instant. Reveal the top X+1 cards of your library and separate them into 2 piles. When an opponent chooses one of those piles, put that pile into your hand and the other into your graveyard. So kind of like Fact or Fiction. So yeah. And then Altar's Reap, which is 1 and a black for a instant. As an additional cost to cast Altar's Reap, sacrifice a creature, but you draw 2 cards, and then same thing goes for Costly Plunder. So all of these cards are great for drawing cards. So yeah. Alright, so now we're going to look at some tutors. So I only have 2 tutors, and right now they're a Diabolic Tutor, which is 2 black, and search the library for a card, put it into your hand. And then Razaketh's Right, which is 3 black, search the library for a card, put that card into your hand. That also has Cycling. And then these 2 other cards are kind of some honorable mentions. Well, not really. They're kind of like one of them is a win con, and the other one is just an all-around really good card. So Revel in Riches is a win con because so Revel in Riches, if you don't know what it is, it's 4 and a black for an enchantment, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you create a treasure. But then at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 10 or more treasures, you win the game. So this is really good with Grimgrin because we're going to be hopefully destroying the creature every turn with Grimgrin because of his attack ability. So with Grimgrin in this, 10 turns, which seems like a long time, and it is, but in 10 turns, you can win the game, which is pretty good. And then the other one is Opposition Agent, which is just a really good card in general. That's 2 and a black for a 3/2. And as Flash, you control your opponents while they're searching their libraries. And it also says, while an opponent is searching their library, they exile each card they find. You may play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. You may spend mana as though they were mana of any color to cast them. So basically, if your opponent is searching their library, you can search their library for them and get something out of their library onto your battlefield. Very good card. And so yeah. So that wraps it up for me. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember to keep magic on your mind.